Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and after clamouring for the finale of Season 5 more than Szechuan sauce, the double bill is now here. Throughout this video, we're going to be breaking down both episodes 9 and 10, and also going over the Easter eggs, hidden details, and things you missed. Now, episode 9 is called Forgetting Sarick Morshall, which is clearly based on the film Forgetting Sarick Morshall. That movie was about a man getting over a breakup, and this is mirrored in the entry when we watch Rick and Morty go their separate ways. The creative team said they really wanted to ask who was Rick without Morty, and this episode explores that theme really well. Now, the pair's relationship has always been pretty strained throughout the series, and this season especially has seen them going off and doing their own thing quite a lot. This idea of the pair doing things on their own is hammered home early on when we see Morty travelling through several dimensions and fixing the destruction that Rick caused. We see him with a full list, and this includes Water City, Spiderbot, Lava Crystal, Tip Jar, Cookie Freedom, Nuclear Worm, Return Conch, Bean Hordes, and Moon Gremlin. Where we start is Cookie Land, which could be based on the iPhone game of the same name, though it's a pretty generic setting. It may also be a nod to Sugar Rush Speedway from Wreck-It Ralph, but sometimes I just have no idea what I'm talking about. Gonna be completely honest with you. I try to get the Easter eggs, but a lot of them are probably wrong. Anyway, we find out there's been a military coup and that the insurgents are about to execute the president live on TV. I'm not touching this with a 10-foot barge pole, as YouTube will slam the yellow icon down due to the way that the world is, but luckily Morty saves the day. Now from here he travels to another dimension with a dam that has a massive hole in it. You might notice that this is the same shape as Rick's ship, and Morty helps out before venturing to a beach planet that's being attacked by a giant lava monster. I feel like this is a nod to Moana, as at the end of that movie we watch as the heroes have to defeat a giant lava god called Tikar. The inhabitants say that the monster appeared after its gem went missing, and this is a nod to the heart of Te Fiti from the aforementioned film. When arriving back home, Morty quickly realizes that Rick has started to suspect this independence, as he notices that the portal fluid tube has been marked. Morty quickly tries to cover it up by mixing in what's left with some lime juice, and it reminds me of when I was a teen and I took a bottle of vodka from my parents' secret stash. Drank most of it because when you're 15 you can handle it straight for some reason, and came home and then filled it with water. Hey presto, they never found out or got drunk again, but Morty almost gets caught by the gun detecting weird fluid inside of it. He gets some on his hand, and this unleashes lots of garbage, which we learn is a stash hole for Nick's stuff. Nick becomes a big character in the episode, and he and Morty find some common ground after he lies about Rick ostracizing him for using his portal gun. Like Morty, it's not the first time I've imagined someone's face on my hand, and from here we cut to the title sequence. Now on the other side of this, Rick quickly realizes that something's been tampered with, and he warns him how toxic it is. Not the portal fluid, the lime juice. Now this is really where the divide comes in between them, and Morty says that he has to do stuff like this because Rick doesn't trust him, which is definitely true. Whenever they go on missions together, he's always the one deciding things, and he says excuse him for not doing the kissy chef gesture, which you should do on this video. Rick brings out the Wheel of Better Things Than Morty, and this is clearly based on the Wheel of Fortune game show. Amongst the options we can see a garbage goober, half a Paul Giamatti, Gene with donkey brains, 2 crows, sentient shit, bag of meat, Kyle 2.0, and lastly Jerry, and then in brackets spin again, because Jerry is clearly not better than Morty. Now Kyle could be a reference to Rick's first sidekick, who we heard Mr. Nimbus talking about in episode 1 of the season, but come the end of 10 that still remains unknown. It lands on 2 crows, and as the old saying goes, if you see 2 of them together, you'll be blessed with good luck. Now we cut to Rick actually carrying out an experiment with 2 crows, and this is known as Pavlovian conditioning. The original experiments carried out by Pavlov involved releasing food after a bell was rang, and the dog that he did this on got so used to the sound meaning a meal that it started to salivate whenever it heard the noise. This methodology has also been used in things like whistle training and basically all manner of getting animals to act in a certain way. The 2 crows end up hitting the bell, which releases the food, and Rick praises them for doing this. He even rewards them by saying the possibility is there that he might share some of his bird quaaludes, and it shows the difference between how he treats them and Morty, as he'd never give him anything. These crows lead Rick on a journey throughout the 2 episodes, and it turns him into Crow Horse, a dark samurai character that ends up unleashing his murder of crows to murder people. Now this breakup / makeup motif is often portrayed in sitcoms, but by the end of the episode, Rick remains with his 2 crows, whereas Morty ends up alone. Now speaking of hitting the bell, if you've been enjoying the video so far, then hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and I'll send you a box of lime juice that definitely isn't Mountain Dew. We'll have to say that for legal reasons, and we are currently doing breakdowns every Wednesday on What If, so if you're a Marvel maniac, then this is the place to be. Now after having a conversation with Nick, Morty realizes that he has someone who's been tossed to the side like he has. On the other hand, hey, he could stay in this toxic cycle with Rick, but he decides to leave him and seeks Nick out. This takes him to Harting Psychiatric Hospital, which we learn is where Nick lives. He springs him loose, and we get some hilarious dialogue here where Nick says that the gods beat them on Sundays, but that's better than Mondays, which is where they lick their faces when they're tied down. This is actually a nod to Terminator 2, namely when a god licked Sarick on his face when she was pretending to be sedated. One of the gods actually encourages him to run, as he says sweat makes the skin saltier, which yeah, very gross. Now during the escape, the pair use their combined portals and a broomstick, which they say is a nod to Jackie Chan. This is riffing on the film First Strike, in which he used one during the most famous fight scene in the movie. Nick says that must make him Chris Tucker, who also starred alongside Chan in Rush Hour, but the guy got the film wrong, and it should have been Morty's first clue that something was off. Get rid of him. Now cut to Rick on an Indiana Jones-esque adventure through a tomb, which contains similar iconography to the temple in the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark. There sits a golden idol above a throne, but down one of the passages we can see little aliens being crushed, and the crows plead with Rick to save them instead of getting the golden treasure. The crows try and teach him that the true prize is empathy, an idea that he initially rejects, and thus he fires them onto a planet. However, come the end of the episode, Rick does learn true empathy, and he sees that he let Morty down due to the toxicity of their relationship. Rick says that if he wanted another bleeding heart, that he'd inject Reanimator serum into an actual bleeding heart, and this is a nod to the zombie movie Reanimator, in which a scientist found a way to bring corpses and body parts back to life. Rick's plan backfires, and he's pulled to the planet, where he comes face to face with the Crow leader. Later on, Rick mentions that their place is very Dark Crystals meets Hot Topic, and the design that the crows carry looks very similar to the aforementioned puppets by Jim Henson. Their ship is powered by a giant golden one, and it could be riffing on the purple one from the Dark Crystal film and series. The leader speaks in what sounds like tongue twisters, and this phrasing could be a nod to the poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Crows and raven species overlap throughout the world, and I know this because I double checked it on Google. Now, this might be why he says, we train ourselves to stop training the train that are untrained, we are trained, all training is complete. Nevermore, this makes Rick realize the power of the crows, and after smoking a magic cigarette, he realizes he can dunk on Morty even more. We then jump back to Morty and see him and Nick smashing up Rick's garage. Aside from Jerry doing an X-Men and turning into a giant puddle of water like Senator Kelly, we can catch graffiti around there that says Portal Boys for life, crows suck, and crows blow. They get a portal gun and leave in Jerry's car, which is when Rick returns home with the Crow overlords to find the destruction left in the wake of the Portal Boys. The crows aren't impressed after they find the wheel of better things than Morty, and they launch the Crowvolution. This idea of birds turning on humans is similar to the Alfred Hitchcock film The Birds, in which the animals turned on their masters. Well, we're not their masters, but sometimes we give them bread. Now there's an amazing scene in which crows number a climbing frame, and they end up going wild like what we see in the episode. Things are as equally bad for Morty as Nick goes crazy and ruins a deal for portal fluid. Morty escapes, but Nick tracks him down due to them being all connected, and we learn that Rick sent him to the mental hospital after he tried to steal a portal gun from him. On the train tracks, Morty cuts off his own hand, and he drops it into Nick's leg, which makes him into a singularity that closes in on itself. He heads out to help Rick, who is fighting for his life against the crows. However, after the two crows say that they want bird quaaludes, he uses the lightning whips from the start of the episode to decimate the lords. Rick realizes that he has a true friendship with them, and he returns to Morty to give him the bad news. During this, he fixes his hand, and whilst listing off the options, he mentions the time that he gave him a giant one, which connects this to the arm of the episode. Now Rick gives Morty the portal gun and leaves with the crow in a heartbreaking end. I'm not crying, you're crying. Now the creative team said at the end that Rick being in this partnership with the crows is what truly opened his eyes to how he was with Morty, and it allows him to move on. They said in the end that it means more when it's an equal partnership, and he ends up going off to do his own thing with people that are more his equal, as they are better than Morty, to be fair, we do know that for definite. Now we end with Garbage Goober and his wife having a fallout because she wants him to be more than Rick allows him to be. We see that he's got a degree at Harvard Medical School and that he's only playing this role because Rick has forced him down this path, much like he did with Morty. He has the chance to break out of it, but unlike our two characters in the episode, he resigns himself to his fate, much to the behest of his wife. Now he's literally someone that's put in place to clean up Rick's garbage, and it could be mirroring the start of the episode in which Morty had to go around fixing everything that he'd broken. It sort of foreshadows the arc that Morty also goes on in episode 10, and from here we jump to the Rick and Two Crows show, aka Rick Mirai Jack. This name for the entry is obviously based on the animated show Samurai Jack, which too has appeared on Adult Swim. We open with chapter 13 titled A Wing and a Prayer, which means doing something dangerous in which you need divine help or luck for. The phrase originates from the Second World War when pilot Hugh G. Ashcraft Jr. returned home from battle. His plane was badly damaged and didn't look like it was going to make it, and he then instructed the crew to pray. They returned home, and this story inspired the film The Flying Tigers, in which John Wayne's character said she's coming in on one wing in a prayer. Now we see the owl invasion on an ancient Japanese-inspired settlement, and Rick arrives much like a samurai to destroy them. Morty just so happens to be in the neighborhood, supposedly, and we don't even get to hear what he's been up to when we cut to an anime-inspired opening. We watch as Rick roams the land looking for a man named Crowscare, and here he comes across Pussifier, a tiger-like warrior that is heavily based on Kintaro from Mortal Kombat 2. An older Morty arrives to trick Rick into thinking that he's wasted his life, but this is revealed to be a trick, and something similar was used in episode 1 of the season in order to trick Morty. The bartender actually calls him a poser, and he correctly guesses that he's not an old man when he orders a rum and coke. Morty recounts how Jerry was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and that Rick would have loved it, which, yeah, bit of a dark joke. Now we learn that in this fake backstory that Summer married a junkie, and just goes to show how much Morty thinks of his sister. Morty just wants him to come home, but Rick refuses, and we cut to him lying in a Witcher-esque bed. Rick is currently pretending to be asleep, and it's at this point he realizes that the crows are working behind his back for Crowscare. Though he was featured in the intro, here we come face to face with him properly, and his design is heavily based on Scarecrow, a Batman villain from the comics and films. We learn that the crows actually were his sidekicks originally, and that they used him as a rebound, much in the same way that Rick used them to rebound from Morty. Rick returns home and gives his crow horse free will, which sends it off on his own adventure to destroy humanity, much like its crow brethren. Morty just wants Rick to come home, and we very much see that he has no self-respect. We learn that he bought the aging serum from the Citadel, and the pair return there. You might remember this from featuring in episodes such as Close Encounters of the Rick Kind, The Rick Shank Redemption, and Tales from the Citadel, in which we learned that Evil Morty had won an election there. We see the outcome of this play out in the episode, and throughout see different versions of the character, including Jesus Morty, Lizard Morty, and an Underdweller Morty escaping from the sewers. At the end of the episode, it's revealed that these live under the Citadel, and this moment very much teases towards what's coming down the line. Now, I think the process here is hilarious, and they break every bone in his body, shrink him down to a child, and then push them together. He comes out looking pink like a newborn baby mouse, and we see that the 26 years taken from him must either be paid for to be disposed of, or taken with them. This creates an adult Morty complete with the same tattoo that he had at 40, showing that he got it in his younger years, much like how I got my tattoos in Magaluf, like some moron. Now, he's a bloody SJW, and he ends up getting shot after attempting to save the Underdweller, who exposes the truth behind President Morty. The president then invites them for dinner, and this is where everything kicks off. It's a very "no Mr. Bond, I expect you to dine" moment, and shoutouts tvtropes.org for pointing out that Rick isn't surprised by the reveal, as it's clear he already figured it out way ahead of time. This conversation is very meta, and they talk about how keeping the show episodic instead of serialized makes it drama-free. It's something that the fans have debated a lot about this season, and I'm in the camp of wishing that everything kinda had a through line, as I find these 2 episodes way better than the majority of season 5. Evil Morty very much shows Morty that any Morty can be great, all he has to do is ditch Rick, but as we've seen, he's refused to do this time and time again. We learn that Evil Morty has a copy of Rick's memories, and we see some of these moments including him building his ship, throwing a paper ball at Jerry's head, and also Snuffles, who you might remember from the episode Lawnmower Dog. From here we get an awesome Stanley-esque cameo, in which he pops in to say that the memory scanning happened in Season 1 Episode 9. Now I don't know if this is a continuity error, but Season 1 Episode 9 was actually Something Rick Had Comes This Way, whereas Evil Rick appeared in the following episode. Kinda ruined the whole thing for me, and I'm furious, but it is possible that the first episode was actually a pilot and therefore counted as 0, which would mean that the following one was Episode 9. I don't know yet, ask Netflix, but if you want to see the continuation of this, then you need to watch Season 1 Episode 10. See kids, your Uncle Kevin's spoilers, he never lets you down. Now we learn that the Citadel is very much a Morty market, which explains the Builder Morty from earlier. We see firsthand how Rick's travel the multiverse, making sure that Jerry and Beth get together, and from here they then steal his genetic material and clone him. It's an amazing scene that shows his entire existence is basically just a cattle market and also a slaughterhouse. Before explaining everything, Rick escapes using a screwdriver in his finger, and he calls himself Inspector Gadget. This was an 80s cartoon that featured a character who had all kinds of gadgets built into him. Realizing that I have to explain that makes me see how old I am, and I just want to be young again. See, kids, just don't turn 30 like your Uncle Kevin's spoilers and you'll be okay. Now he lets Rick go, but it turns out it's a trap, and that Evil Morty has hacked his portal gun. He ends up creating a clone blob that likes pain and absorbs it from him. This metaphor for capitalism just gets screwed over all the time, but he enjoys it, much like Morty. Now though they escape, Evil Morty launches his plan, and he hacks the whole city's portal supply. We also see a Morty wearing a mask, and it makes me think that he's had to deal with the pandemic, which is definitely the worst Morty timeline possible. Rick says that he wants to return to the single story episodes, but at this point there's no going back, and we finally learn his backstory. Now in the Rick Shank Redemption, Rick said he made this up to trick the Federation when they invaded his memory. He lied and said all the details were totally fabricated and that he made it up in order to control them, but we learn here that other than a few details that it was true on the most part. This Rick, Stein and Beth were murdered by a version of himself from the multiverse, and thus he set out on a quest for revenge. We see flashes of his life and prior episodes in this season, including the Battle of Blood Ridge with Bird Person, which we saw play out in Rick-Ternal friendship of the Spotless Mort. There's lots of similarities to the Terminator, including not only the score, but also Rick hunting down specific characters through time, much like the Machine from the movie. He is unable to find peace doing this, and eventually he comes across a version of Beth that wasn't killed, which is where he settles. We see all the infinite universes have been separated, and get confirmation that the one from episode 1 was a different version of Rick and Morty when we see them in the crystals. Evil Morty says that eventually all Mortys become him, and he dons the eye patch that he's classically had. Morty comes to the conclusion that Rick only returned because the crows dumped him, and not because he wanted to. Evil Morty unleashes his plan to destroy everything, and though some believe they're escaping death by killing themselves, all the souls are rerouted into the factory in order to power the weapon. I thought it was so good how Evil Morty asked Morty to come with him, but the second seat was actually a toilet. Made you realise how much like Rick Evil Morty actually was, and the Citadel is finally destroyed once and for all as it collapses into a black hole. Now I might be reaching here, but I thought that this ship looked a lot like Chronopolis from Marvel Comics. The Council of Ricks was based on the Council of Kangs, and Kang ruled over Chronopolis, so that just makes the most sense to me. Evil Morty travels through a black hole, and we hear his theme once more, but here it's far more grander and epic. He has a golden portal gun, and after confirming the multiverse of Rick is destroyed, he travels through it. The creative team said this was very symbolic of someone breaking free of the capitalist society that he'd been bred to be a part of, and Rick and Morty themselves realised that, in working together, they are truly able to live anew. In the post-credits scene we cut to Mr. Poopy Butthole saying that he didn't get his job back after the heist episode. After this he cut himself off from his wife Amy, and he's very much become the bad version of himself, much like Morty. He becomes somewhat of a tragic character who warns us not to take the ones we love for granted, and this is very much reflected in Rick and Morty at the end of the entry. Overall, it's a brilliant way to send the season off, and in my opinion, this is the best one out of the 10. I had a real blast with it, and I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the season as a whole in just a bit, but first I'm going to see if YouTube will hit you with an advert because I need to make some money. Okay, so as for my thoughts on Season 5 as a whole, I kind of think that there's been a lot of highs, but also a lot of lows. Looking back, this will probably be a season that I skipped some episodes for when doing rewatches, and because of this, it's kinda hard to gauge how I feel about everything altogether. That being said, the episodes I've really enjoyed, and there have been some standouts here that I think work really well. Going forward, I think that the series should just embrace its canon and have more episodes involving the characters and plot lines that have come before. There are still some which have question marks over them, and I think that in the future seasons that the creators should just focus less on standalone episodes with potential versions of the family and just have the main ones in the picture. Overall, though I had fun with this season, I was also slightly disappointed in some bits, and hopefully the next one is a lot better than this. Just my opinion of course, but I'd love to hear yours, so make sure you comment below and let me know. We are running a competition right now and giving away 3 copies of the Zack Snyder DC trilogy on the 30th of September, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the season. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of What If Episode 4, which will be linked on screen right now. It's one of the most emotional things in the MCU I've ever seen, and it's also got some really cool Easter eggs that we talk about in that video. If not, then thank you for sticking through this one. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.